Hey, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners, and Kyle here with another post-draft episode. In our last episode, we talked about NFL teams that were winners, specifically giving out some, not really grades, but talking about what teams we think did the best in the draft. But for this video, I want to specifically talk about individual players and how the draft affected their fantasy football value in 2020. So let's dive back into some of this fantasy football talk. But before we do that, I just have to remind you real quick that the Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide is available for pre-order right now. You can go to thefantasyheadliners.com and get yours pre-ordered. It's going to be coming out in June. We're super excited for this. Last year's was almost 500 pages. We actually just had our meeting as a team to talk about what we're going to be putting into the guide, finalizing a lot of the plans to really get this thing finished up and ready for you. And I can almost bet a considerable amount of money that it's going to be more than 500 pages. The best bang for your buck value in all of fantasy football. So make sure that you go down below to the link, go to thefantasyheadliners.com and pre-order yours today. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it, and let's talk about fantasy football winners from the 2020 NFL Draft. All right, let's talk about which quarterbacks I think had the biggest spike in value after the draft. And there are three of them that I want to talk about specifically. Number one, Dak Prescott. Now, the reason that Dak Prescott is a winner for me is obviously 100% they added CeeDee Lamb, okay? So even though CeeDee Lamb might make things a little bit more stressful for you if you're an Amari Cooper owner or a Zeke owner, or if you're a Michael Gallup owner, or if you thought that the Blake Jarwin breakout was coming. So that might make things a little bit more complicated. But when you give a quarterback even more weapons behind a good offensive line that they just added another piece to, they added center Tyler Biadasz, you're able to just see an increase in value, okay? Dak Prescott was one of the best quarterbacks in all of fantasy football last year. Expect a lot of the same things from him again this year. Not only that, but they reinforced that defense a little bit more. So hopefully that defense will be a little bit better when they step on the field this year, because if it is, that just means more time for Dak Prescott to have the ball in his hands. So Dak Prescott, even though he was pretty high in my rankings, adding CeeDee Lamb really reinforces that. And right now, he's my quarterback 3. Derek Carr. I remember at the Combine, standing there listening to Mike Mayock talk, went back to the hotel room, and a fantasy football site that will not be named tweeted out news that Derek Carr was likely to be replaced. And I immediately responded to that and tweeted out that that couldn't be more false. That's not what was said. You got to stop making up the fake headlines. Well, Derek Carr has not been replaced. We're through the 2020 draft. We're through free agency for the most part. There's a couple of guys still sitting out there. Cam Newton, obviously. But Derek Carr, going into 2020, is the starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. And a lot of people didn't think that that was going to end up happening. However, it did. And not only is he going to be the starting quarterback, but they got him weapons. Henry Ruggs going to be the guy that is going to extend the field. Henry Ruggs was not my number one overall wide receiver by any means. I'm actually a little bit lower on him than a lot of people, because to me, he really profiles as a field stretcher. I don't think he's really NFL ready when it comes to his route running. However, that's still good for other guys on the roster. Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, guys who are going to run those intermediate routes really benefit when you've got a field stretcher like Henry Ruggs. So Ruggs might have some big time TDs this year, but what he does outside of just catching the ball could potentially help a lot. But they also added Bryan Edwards, guy that really, if he would have come out of the draft last year, he would have been one of the top wide receivers on the board. He went back for his senior season, went back for his final year, played, and just dropped down draft boards. He's had some injury concerns. However, Bryan Edwards could potentially be the wide receiver 1 in Las Vegas before this is all said and done. I definitely think he is more of a volume guy over Henry Ruggs. Will it happen this year? Potentially no, but in the next couple of years it will. Derek Carr saw a huge bump because they reinforced that he is the starter. They didn't add a quarterback. They got him the weapons that he needs. Hopefully that offensive line is ready to roll. Derek Carr could have a really good season. And finally, Drew Lock. Drew Lock, another guy that a lot of people were really excited about, but said, does he have enough weapons? Now he does. They added Jerry Jeudy because he plummeted. Him and CeeDee Lamb both fell down the draft board after Henry Ruggs ended up going as the wide receiver 1. Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb ended up falling. So the Denver Broncos got a little bit of a gift there because they get to add Jerry Jeudy, but then they come in and they add KJ Hamler afterwards as well. Another guy that can stretch the field, a lightning quick guy. So now he's got weapons all over the place. Noah Fant. We know Melvin Gordon is there. Obviously, we've got Cortland Sutton still there. Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. So they've got guys all over the place. And then again, just like Dak Prescott, we added a center, Lloyd Cushenberry, a guy that can come in and potentially help the offensive line. So with all these guys, it's the same for all of them, for the most part. But they work on that offensive line for 2 of them. But all 3 of these guys got additional weapons to really help spread the ball out a little bit. So now they have a lot of different options to go to. And there's potentially going to be a lot of guys open for these quarterbacks in 2020. All right, let's talk about running backs now. And I've got 3 running backs that were big benefactors after the draft concluded. Leonard Fournette being at the top of that list because of all of the speculation, all of the talk, everything prior to the draft was that they were going to try and move on from Leonard Fournette, and it did not happen. So he was not traded. He sticks there in Jacksonville as of right now. That's huge because they didn't draft a running back either to come in and try and help out. What could potentially happen? Now, they have Raquel Armstead there. We talked about him a lot last season as a potential Leonard Fournette fill-in if Fournette were to get hurt. That didn't end up happening, so Armstead didn't see a whole lot. However, keep an eye on that name moving forward, but they didn't get another guy either. They didn't try to invest in one of these top running backs. They worked on the defense, which was sorely needed. So they didn't go working on the running back position, which means Leonard Fournette is going to be set in stone, again, as a full-time back, a guy that really surprised with a lot of catches out of the backfield. If he can get the same type of volume but score a little bit more this year, then we're looking at, again, a top 10 option with considerable upside every single week. But one thing to keep in mind, too, Gardner Minshew being the starting quarterback there now, they could run some RPO stuff there. Last year, Minshew averaged 5.1 yards per carry. That was 6th most among QB qualifiers. And he had 50 scrambles last year. Now, scrambles are runs that were not designed runs. So Minshew out there working a little bit, defenses are going to have to pay attention to him because he could be a sneaky guy this year that could run a little bit, could pick up some yards with his feet. If that happens and they do some RPO stuff, then that could be a definite benefactor for Leonard Fournette to pick up some extra yards because now defenses are going to have to try and cue on one of those guys. They're not just going to be able to wait for Fournette if Minshew can move a little bit. And back to his 50 scrambles last year, that was first in the NFL for Gardner Minshew. My second running back and a guy that I am going to talk about a lot this offseason. Now, I will tell you, I love Rashad Penny. I'm a Rashad Penny truther, but we're not going to see very much of Rashad Penny this year. Chris Carson is definitely a guy that we need to be investing in. We're going to have some more in-depth videos. This is going to be one of my top running backs to try and get in drafts this year. We'll talk about that more in some videos later on, but just keep that in the back of your mind right now that if you're out there in a dynasty league, go try to get Chris Carson. If you do redraft leagues, when we get to draft season, you're going to want him on your big board. They didn't draft a top running back. So one of the concerns is that Rashad Penny is obviously going to miss quite a bit of time. Chris Carson had that injury. He could potentially be ready for the start of the year, and it looks like he's headed that way. But if they were to invest in a running back, now we know, oh, maybe Chris Carson isn't nearly as healthy as we thought, and it didn't happen. So they didn't draft in one of those top running backs. There's no Penny to start the season either, so he's really going to have that backfield to himself. He's not going to have to worry about those touches getting taken away there. They do have backups there, obviously, that can come in and help out and give him breathers, but nobody that's going to take away the type of collateral that Rashad Penny could have potentially done. And then over the last 2 years, the Seattle Seahawks have averaged 31.15 rushing attempts per game. They were third last year. They were second the year before that in rushing attempts per game. So again, a lot for Chris Carson to get this season. Austin Eckler is my final one. There's a lot of people talking about Austin Eckler heading into draft season. He is a guy that really helped out a lot of teams. had a really good season last year, and that was with Melvin Gordon still being there. So part of the thought process was, yes, they paid Austin Eckler, but he is not a RB1 type player. He's not a guy that's going to shoulder the workload. He's not a guy that's going to have a ton invested. He's not going to be a guy that they're going to give the ball to over and over and over and over and over, a workhorse. But they didn't go adding a top running back. That was a thought process that some people had, is, oh, maybe the Los Angeles Chargers, maybe the Los Angeles Chargers, sneak in the second round and take one of these guys, but they ended up trading their second and third round pick to move back into the first and make another draft pick. And they also drafted Justin Herbert. So part of my concern was that Tyrod Taylor just wasn't going to do enough to kind of keep the focus off Austin Eckler. A rookie quarterback like Justin Herbert, if he can come in and win that job at some point this season, he's going to have to rely on Austin Eckler. Yes, he's going to have a lot of weapons around him, but with a rookie quarterback, if you kind of get a little scared back there and moving around and your feet are all over the place, sometimes you're going to dump it off to the running back and let them pick up some of those yardage. So that could be a real good thing for Austin Eckler this year as well. And then again, I mentioned Melvin Gordon already, but Gordon is leaving behind 204 touches from last season. So Melvin Gordon still got an awful lot of touches last year, and Austin Eckler was still able to perform extremely well. Even with the guys that they do have on the roster, even with the guys that they added, Austin Eckler is primed to have a big season because he's going to get more than enough work to go out there and get everything taken care of and score you a ton of points. All right, moving on. We got to talk about what ball catchers are winners after the NFL draft. But real quick, I got to tell you why the Fantasy Headliners and Manscaped can help make your balls winners this offseason. That's right, the Fantasy Headliners. We are partnering up with Manscaped to give you some exclusive deals on Manscaped products. Right now, if you head over to the Manscaped website, there is a link down below. You can use the promo code Headliners and get 20% off the perfect package. Jake and I both got this a little bit ago, and I tell you what, they've got some excellent stuff in there, including the brand new Lawnmower 3.0. So while you're in quarantine, you got to make sure that you're keeping up on yourself. Don't let yourself go too much. Even if you can't get out there and get your hair cut, you got to make sure that you're also taking care of yourself in other places as well. So head over to manscaped.com. You can use the link below in the video description. Get 20% off the perfect package. And again, make your balls winners this off season. But we got to talk about wide receivers, right? What wide receivers were winners this year in the draft? I've got 3 of them for you. The first one being Keenan Allen. So I just talked about Austin Eckler, so we're just going to move right on into Keenan Allen as well. I was worried about Keenan Allen with Tyrod Taylor. Here's the thing. I don't think Tyrod Taylor is that bad of a quarterback. Okay, I think he can get the job done. I think he can do just enough. Justin Herbert, though, Justin Herbert's going to be able to do more, okay? I know a lot of people are down on him because his final season just didn't go that great, but he's still a very talented quarterback. The thing that would have worried me about Tyrod Taylor is that he would have went out and potentially focused on one wide receiver, make that connection. I think Herbert's going to be able to spread the ball around a little bit, and that's why I'm good with Keenan Allen now. I was just a little bit concerned about it and thought maybe I would drop him a little bit in the rankings, but quite honestly, after as well re-signing Hunter Henry and not really focusing on the wide receiver position in the draft because they've got Mike Williams already, they have Keenan Allen, you've got Hunter Henry, you've got Austin Eckler, you got plenty of guys to catch balls there. Keenan Allen is going to end up having still a very good season. So he is a winner for me because they do end up drafting Justin Herbert. And if they would have drafted Tua, I don't know if I would have put Keenan Allen in here for 2020 because I don't think Tua is going to play a ton this season. He still has some recovering to do. I don't know if he would have unseated, I don't think he would have unseated Tyrod Taylor right away because I think they're going to ease him back into it. But Justin Herbert is a guy that definitely could be the starting quarterback week 1. So that's why Keenan Allen is a winner for me. Marquise Brown is also a winner as well. And this might be a guy that a lot of people have lost, some thoughts on or haven't really thought about this offseason. they did add 2 wide receivers. And that was the biggest thing about Marquise Brown is heading into the draft. I kept saying the Baltimore Ravens have to add some wide receivers. They have to add some weapons. And they do add 2 weapons, Devin Duvernay and James Prochet. Both of these guys, Duvernay out of Texas, Prochet out of SMU. Both of these guys could be really, really good help. Prochet is a guy that a lot of people didn't really talk about, but I think he's really underrated. He could have maybe a year or 2 to grow a little bit, but they added some pass catching weapons. So now Marquise Brown doesn't necessarily need to be the dominant wide receiver 1. Is he going to be the wide receiver 1 there? Yes, but he's not going to have all the focus on him. I don't think that he can handle that. I don't think he has what it takes to do that, but I think it's also good that they drafted J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins is a really, really good running back. He's going to be able to do a lot of things that Mark Ingram can't do. He's going to be able to do a lot of things, that Justice Hill can't do. I think he's the best combination of Mark Ingram and Justice Hill put together. He's going to be able to shoulder some of that workload on the ground. He's going to be able to catch some balls out of the backfield. So I think having another receiving threat out of the backfield is going to be really, really good for Marquise Brown, for Lamar Jackson as well, but it's good for Marquise Brown because they needed a lot of weapons to take the focus away from him. So for wide receivers, he's definitely a winner for me. And to wrap up wide receivers, Devontae Parker. They didn't end up drafting a top wide receiver. The Miami Dolphins did such a good job of focusing on the picks that would make the team better, not the picks that people would love to see. And they did that. And one of the things we talked about as we were nearing that 3rd pick in the first round is what if they take a look at some of these wide receivers? What if they tried to trade up and grab a wide receiver? We talked about all those scenarios. We talked about them potentially taking a running back as well. They didn't do it. They didn't end up drafting a top wide receiver. They didn't really end up adding a ton of weapons there. They're going with what they have. So Devontae Parker has the ability to remain as the wide receiver 1 there in Miami. And he gets to start the season with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Again, not because Ryan Fitzpatrick is better than Tua, okay? Tua's obviously better than him when he's 100% healthy. So at that point, when are we going to see Tua this year? That's the thing. Do we see him at all? Does it take a full year for him to really get back and get into it? Is Miami investing in that long-term deal? So with that being said, Devontae Parker gets to start with the big-armed Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy that we know is going to throw the ball down the field, that's going to take some risks. Devontae Parker, with an excellent season last year, gets to continue some of that work here in 2020. So there we go, wrapping up this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Do me a favor though, okay? We're setting some goals over on Patreon. So if you are able and willing, we are going to be dropping a ton of exclusive content. So if you love what we're doing here on the Fantasy Headliners, you can get access to even more information, articles, podcasts, everything from the Fantasy Headliners for as little as $5 a month. So hit that link down below. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a goal of 100 new supporters on Patreon by my birthday. My birthday's coming up in about a month, May 27th. So as a birthday present, Headliner Nation would love to celebrate 100 new subscribers on Patreon. So let's shoot for that goal. If you're able and willing, head over there. A lot of different tiers, a lot of different options. But make sure before you leave this video, hit that like button for me. Also, if you've never subscribed to the Fantasy Headliners, subscribe now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notification, so anytime we go live or drop content, you are made aware. And comment below, who was your biggest winner from the draft this year for fantasy football? Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Have a great one, and I'll see you on the next one.